Hey guys, tonight we tumble into the sandals of a god who's part theater kid, part winemaker, part chaos gremlin, and somehow still manages to hold a starring role in world mythology. You're standing in an ancient grove, ivy curling up marble pillars, a faint drumbeat echoing through the trees. Somewhere, laughter bubbles up, hysterical, half drunk, half divine. That's Dionysus for you, god of revelry, performance, and very poor impulse control. But don't let the toga and wine cup fool you. The world of Dionysus is not all candlelight and Cabernet. This is a god who inspires both ecstasy and terror. And tonight, we're going to wander through vineyards, lose our sandals at traveling cult festivals, maybe survive a goat sacrifice or two. You probably won't survive this, but it'll be an entertaining mess. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake after all that, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this little bedtime parade travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the back corner of Mount Olympus, where not everyone's got a throne, but everyone thinks they deserve one. Dionysus isn't like the other Olympians. For starters, he's late to the party. Not fashionably late, just literally not there at first. He's born to a mortal woman, Semele, who catches the eye of Zeus, the ancient Greek equivalent of a married man with too much power and zero discretion. The story goes that Zeus woos her in disguise, and when she asks to see his true divine form, he says, "You sure about that?" and then promptly vaporizes her with holy lightning. That should have been the end. But the fetus, Dionysus, is snatched from the ashes. Zeus, in one of mythology's less hygienic moves, sews the unborn child into his own thigh. Yep, you heard that right. 9 months later, or whenever the writers decided, Dionysus is born again, technically making him twice born. This detail becomes a huge part of his mythos. The god who dies and returns, who crosses borders between life and death, god and mortal, man and woman. Historians still argue whether this rebirth symbolism connects Dionysus to earlier fertility gods from Mesopotamia and Thrace. Some even suggest he started as a foreign deity imported to Greece, which would explain his outsider status and tendency to throw parties in the woods instead of Olympus board meetings. From the moment he exists, Dionysus doesn't really fit in. Hera, Zeus's jealous wife, is not a fan. She sends assassins, madness, and wild beasts his way. It's like a divine version of Mean Girls. So, baby Dionysus is smuggled away, passed between caretakers like a mythological game of hot potato. He's raised by nymphs in secret caves, or by a wise old man named Silenus, who is, frankly, drunk most of the time. One tale even has Dionysus being turned into a goat to hide him from danger. Yes, the literal break god pan vibes start early. But even in childhood, Dionysus is intense. Wherever he goes, vines sprout from the ground, animals act weird, and people start speaking in tongues. Imagine being a shepherd just trying to tend your flock, and suddenly the hillside erupts in grapevines, and your sheep start dancing. It's unsettling. Here's the thing. Dionysus is a god who doesn't just represent chaos. He is chaos. Not in the villainous, mustache-twirling way, but in that release your inhibitions and lose yourself in the moment sort of way. He's not just wine, but the feeling after too much wine. He's not just theater, but the scene where everything breaks down and someone starts monologuing at the stars. You trudge along dusty roads with him now, hearing the rattle of tambourines and the murmur of the faithful. His followers are misfits, women who've left their homes, men who wear ivy crowns and masks, old philosophers who just want to feel something again. They call him liberator. They chant in choruses. They get really into interpretive dance. And yet, this God who throws weird parties and walks barefoot through thorns, he gets a seat on Olympus. Eventually. Some say it's because he earned it, going through death and madness and still coming out with a decent vineyard. Others say it's because, well, he's Zeus's kid and nepotism is eternal. Still, Dionysus remains the god who doesn't quite sit still. He's part of the 12 Olympians, but he never stays home. His stories unfold not in the polished halls of Olympus, but in the muddy villages, forest glades, and cliffside amphitheaters of Greece. And wherever he steps, you can be sure of two things. There will be music, and something will catch fire. You're still walking, well, stumbling a bit now, beside Dionysus, whose life has already taken a couple of dramatic turns, and he's not even through divine puberty yet. Remember how he was born from Zeus's thigh? Well, the drama doesn't stop there. His second birth earns him the nickname Demeter, twice born, a title that sounds poetic until you realize it's essentially ancient Greek for medical anomaly. This thigh birth thing? Yeah. Historians still argue whether it symbolizes rebirth, male creativity, or simply some myth writer having a laugh. Some scholars think it represents a divine balancing act, Zeus birthing a god to prove male power, because heaven forbid women get too much credit even in mythology. Others say it's just a metaphor for fermentation, which tracks, honestly. Grapes, heat, pressure, voila, god of wine. So now you've got this toddler god with a complicated birth certificate and a hit squad after him. Hera still isn't over Zeus's wandering eyes, so she sends wave after wave of misfortunes. The nymphs who raised Dionysus must constantly move around to protect him, and you can practically hear the ancient lullabies echoing through mountaintop caves. One version has Dionysus raised by his Aunt Ino and Uncle Athamas, who, under Hera's influence, go mad and try to boil their own children. And you thought your family dinners were tense. Dionysus narrowly escapes this, again, but not before chaos leaves a mark on everyone involved. Another tale places him on Mount Nysa, a name that might sound mythical, but has led historians on a centuries-long wild goose chase across Asia and Africa. Is Nysa in Ethiopia? India? Thrace? Historians still argue whether it ever existed outside poetic imagination. Some say it was a stand-in for somewhere wild, a mythic place that felt far enough from Greece for gods to do weird stuff without neighbors gossiping. Wherever Nysa is, it's a jumble of sensation. You hear waterfalls, parrots, drums. Ivy twists around tree trunks, and the air smells like overripe fruit and sweat. It's there, far from Olympus, that Dionysus grows up among satyrs, half-goat, all attitude, and maenads, frenzied women who dance like their lives depend on it. You can imagine Dionysus here, a child god running barefoot, grape juice on his chin, playing tag with creatures out of fever dreams. This isn't a childhood of golden chariots and polite banquets. This is wildness. This is someone learning early that the world doesn't follow rules, and neither should he. As Dionysus matures, so does his effect on the world. People don't just notice him, they feel him. They start singing strange songs, building makeshift altars in forests, and celebrating festivals that begin as wine tastings and end with someone climbing a tree naked to speak to the moon. It's not all fun and fermented fruit, though. Dionysus is still hunted. In one haunting story, pirates kidnap him, thinking he's a soft-looking prince. They tie him up on their ship, but the ropes won't hold. Ivy bursts from the mast. A bear appears on the deck. The pirates panic, jump into the sea, and become dolphins. Classic Dionysus. Don't mess with him unless you're prepared to join SeaWorld. Even here, the themes of disguise, misjudgment, and transformation echo. Dionysus constantly shifts shape: child, man, woman, god, beast, and others either adapt or perish. It's theater in its rawest form: masks, tension, surprise endings. By now, you're realizing Dionysus isn't the god of wine, like a bartender is the god of mojitos. He's the god of what happens to you after you drink. He embodies the threshold between sanity and madness, order and anarchy, daytime rituals and midnight trances. His cult grows, especially among women. Maenads, his most famous followers, are often depicted as frenzied, ecstatic, possibly tipsy dancers. But don't let the tambourines fool you. These women leave their homes, families, societal roles. In myth, they tear animals limb from limb in trance. In life, they probably danced in the woods and scared the local men enough that rumors grew. You walk beside one now. She's crowned in ivy, barefoot, and humming a tune you can't quite place. She offers you wine from a wooden cup and tells you that the god lives in your breath, your blood, your shadow. You drink, and suddenly the forest feels warmer, the trees seem to sway with you, and someone starts playing a flute you swear wasn't there a second ago. Was that magic? Or was that just you letting go? One little-known tidbit: in some regions, early Dionysian rites involved honey instead of wine. Before the Greek wine culture boomed, people brewed mead, fermented honey. So Dionysus, god of intoxication, may have started off sweet. A god of bees and buzzes, if you will. The line between history and myth here is hazy, like wineglass fog. But that's the point. Dionysus is not about clarity. He's about immersion, sensation, and letting the story sweep you away. And sweep you away it does. The young god is now fully grown, with flowing curls, robes finer than a Fashion Week model, and a mischievous half-smile. He's not a warrior like Ares, or a king like Zeus. He's a performer, a wanderer, and every town he visits either transforms or suffers. You keep walking, and the beat of a drum grows louder. The drumbeat you heard? Yeah, it's not slowing down. It's getting louder, more insistent, like your heart is sinking to some ancient rhythm. You follow it, feet crunching on pine needles, and suddenly you're in the thick of a Dionysian procession. Think of it as the original roadshow, less Broadway, more Broadvine. This phase of Dionysus' life is all about the journey. No chariot, no GPS. Just wild followers, drums, and a mission to spread the cult of wine, madness, and impromptu theater. You trudge beside him as the group winds through mountains, valleys, and villages that will never be the same after they pass. In myth, this is Dionysus returning from the east, perhaps India, perhaps Phrygia, perhaps somewhere entirely invented. Historians still argue whether these stories reflect real trade routes and cultural exchanges, or are just a mythic flex, painting the god as cosmopolitan before cosmopolitan was cool. Either way, what matters is the imagery. A god marching with women, beasts, old men, and divine tricksters across the countryside, turning fields into festivals and skeptics into believers. Dionysus doesn't force you to follow him. But once you do, you don't go back unchanged. The followers, Maenads, Satyrs, Silenus the wine-soaked tutor, aren't background characters. They are the performance. The Maenads in particular take center stage. In myths, they're described as wild, euphoric, but also terrifying. You watch them dancing in circles, letting their hair down, literally and metaphorically, chanting with their eyes rolled back. It's spiritual, sure, but also psychological theater, breaking societal roles with every bare footstep. There's a fringe theory among classicists that Dionysian rites offered ancient women temporary liberation from rigid patriarchal norms. One scholar even proposed that the frenzies were an early form of controlled catharsis. You know, a weekend of screaming in the forest before going back to your loom and marriage contract. Makes therapy look tame. You pass a shepherd standing slack-jawed as the procession coils through his field. He was probably just trying to check on his goats, and now he's watching a god with perfect curls pour wine that turns into ivy. Someone hands him a mask made of bark and whispers. "Sing!" He does. This is how Dionysus converts towns, not with arguments, but with experiences. You don't get a pamphlet. You get overwhelmed. You get immersed. And the fashion? Impeccable. Dionysus himself often wears long robes with gold trim, a crown of ivy or grape leaves, and sometimes even women's clothing. This isn't drag, it's divine fluidity. Gender, for Dionysus, is a costume, and every day's a new play. He's been called the effeminate god, but that's really just ancient Greek for fashion forward. He embraces ambiguity, both in appearance and in morality. He blesses and he punishes. He seduces and he scares. And his followers? They dress like him, move like him, and vanish into the identity-blurring joy of performance. You might expect resistance in the towns he visits. And you'd be right. Not everyone loves spontaneous cult activity in the marketplace. There's always that one local magistrate, usually bearded and overly fond of laws, who tries to shut things down. It never ends well for him. In one myth, a king named Pentheus tries to outlaw Dionysian rites. Spoiler, Pentheus ends up wearing a disguise, spying on the Maenads, and getting torn limb from limb by his own mother in a trance. You shiver. The tale is tragic, grotesque, but also theatrical, like Euripides wrote it for maximum dramatic tension. He did. Remember that Dionysus brings joy, but also danger. His processions are parties, but they're also tests. Will you open yourself to chaos, or resist it and be crushed? And here's a quirky little footnote from the archaeological side of things. We found small, portable altars and masks tucked in rural homes, signs that Dionysian worship wasn't just public theater. It was private too, performed by everyday Greeks who might have been bakers by day, ecstatic dancers by night. You walk with the god through a narrow pass now, the stars visible above. The music quiets. A satyr plucks at a lyre. Dionysus pauses, looks at you with eyes that are somehow ancient and childlike all at once, and smiles. Then, the party moves on, because it always moves on. Your sandals are dustier now, your legs a little sore. But Dionysus? He looks fresh as ever, like someone who just discovered dry shampoo and divine hydration. The parade of wild things continues through olive groves and over rocky hills, and the further you go, the louder the strange singing becomes. It's not just music, it's a sound that gets inside your ribcage, tapping at your bones like a gentle but persistent spoon on a wineglass. You're about to find out why this matters, because tonight, it's time for a crash course in the very beginning of tragedy. Yes, literal tragedy. Before it meant stories about sad kings and talking ghosts, it was basically Dionysus fanfiction set to go music. And we are absolutely here for it. Let's back up a bit. The word tragedy comes from tragoidia, which means goat's song in ancient Greek. Now, historians still argue whether this name comes from an actual goat being sacrificed, someone wearing a goat costume, or possibly just an unfortunate singer with a bleeding voice. Regardless, the association with Dionysus is clear. His early rituals, called dithyrambs, were choral songs performed in his honor, usually by slightly tipsy groups of men pretending to be satyrs. You're watching one now. Picture 30 men in a tight circle, stomping, clapping, and wailing out praise to the god of wine with all the subtlety of a tailgate party. There's a goat tied nearby, for dramatic effect, not dinner, and someone's trying to play an almas, a double reed flute that sounds like a bagpipe's dream sequence. It's disorganized. It's passionate. It's theater, just barely. But from these beginnings, the Greeks build an entire dramatic tradition. Over time, the dithyrambs become more structured. Soloists step out from the chorus. Characters emerge. Dialogue happens. And suddenly, you've got a protoplay performed at a festival honoring Dionysus. The city Dionysia in Athens becomes the event. It's a multi-day blowout dedicated to the god, featuring processions, sacrifices, and most famously, drama competitions. Poets like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides write entire trilogies for the occasion, most of them dark, dense, and full of lessons about hubris, fate, and why marrying your mother is a bad idea. But remember, this isn't just entertainment. It's ritual. You're sitting in a massive amphitheater carved into a hillside, surrounded by thousands of citizens, slaves, visitors, and vendors selling olives on sticks. The air is electric, and every play performed here is considered an offering to Dionysus. A communal act of spiritual binge-watching. You feel it now. Theater as a form of collective transformation. The masks, the stylized gestures, the chorus echoing your own doubts and desires, it's immersive. The line between performer and audience blurs. The god watches with you, through you. And it's not just tragedy. Comedy grows from the same roots. Think slapstick satire, rude jokes about local politicians, like a Shakespeare W.R. You glance at a mask lying in the dirt near the stage, half smiling, half weeping. It looks like it knows your secrets. That's Dionysus' gift, and his curse. He shows you the version of yourself you didn't know existed. Now here's where it gets weirder. Some rural Dionysian rituals include actual theatrical contests, but with animals. Goats dancing on hind legs. Pigs wearing wreaths. No, seriously. In one obscure mountain village, priests supposedly trained a rooster to peck at a tiny lyre. Historians still argue whether this was real or a satirical footnote from a bored scribe, but either way, it's extremely on brand. You shift in your seat as the performance on the hillside ends. The crowd erupts, not in clapping but in song. Everyone joins the chorus for the final hymn to Dionysus. You don't know the words, but you hum anyway. The sun is setting behind the stage, casting long shadows across the rocky seats. The actor playing Dionysus steps forward. He wears a golden mask, his voice low and smooth like syrup over marble. He speaks directly to you, not the audience you. "Are you still pretending?" he asks. You don't have an answer. You're no longer just walking alongside Dionysus. You're immersed in him, his rituals, his music, the sway of his cult. But tonight, the god pulls back his golden mask and invites you to question everything you thought you knew. Because if there's one thing Dionysus really excels at, it's bending the rules of identity. You look over and realize the person beside you has changed. Not physically, necessarily, but they've taken off a mask. Or put one on. Or maybe both. Hard to tell. And that's the point. Dionysus doesn't just allow transformation, he requires it. The ancient world, for all its dusty temples and straight-laced philosophers, had very rigid definitions of gender and role. Men were citizens, soldiers, philosophers. Women were wives, mothers, keepers of the hearth. But Dionysus? He laughed in the face of those binaries. You've heard of him as the wine god, sure, but did you know he was also called Androgynos, the androgynous one? In vase paintings, he's often shown with soft features, long hair, flowing robes. Sometimes he's mistaken for a woman entirely. And he's fine with that. He blurs the lines. Historians still argue whether these portrayals were meant to honor gender fluidity or simply reinforce his outsider status. Some suggest his look and demeanor came from Eastern influences, like the Phrygian god Sabazios or even deities from India. Others say it's an internal evolution, Greek society wrestling with identity through its most unpredictable god. Whatever the case, Dionysus becomes a symbol of boundary breaking, not just in gender, but in class, age, and state of mind. His cult welcomes women, foreigners, and the socially marginalized. Where other gods uphold the social order, Dionysus flips the table, drinks the wine, and starts a conga line. You're watching one of his rituals now. It's night. Torches burn low. A group of men, city officials by day, have donned veils, robes, and makeup. They dance and sing in falsetto, channeling divine feminine energy in a way that would get them exiled under different circumstances. But tonight, in Dionysus' name, they're free. No judgment. Just rhythm. And it's not just men exploring femininity. Women in Dionysian rites often adopt roles of power, leading chants, initiating newcomers, embodying divine rage. They're not demure priestesses. They're ecstatic avatars of the god. They shout, they laugh, they cry, they feel. You might be wondering, how did society handle this? Well, not always well. The mainstream city elite tolerated the public festivals, but were wary of the private rites, especially the ones outside city walls. The mysteria, secret Dionysian rituals, were known to involve intense emotional release, symbolic death and rebirth, and possibly some hallucinogenic herbs. And when people transform that deeply, governments get nervous. One fragment from an ancient Athenian legal speech accuses a group of citizens of unmanly conduct, during a Dionysian rite. They wore women's clothes, danced like satyrs, and sang songs that made even the flute player blush. Was it true? Was it slander? Historians still debate. But what's clear is this: Dionysus gave people permission to step outside their assigned roles, and that terrified the powers that be. There's even a minor myth, often glossed over, about a young soldier who joined the Dionysian rites in disguise. For 3 nights he danced, wept, and confessed things he could never say to his fellow hoplites. On the 4th night, he vanished into the woods. Some say he became a satyr. Others say he found peace and returned home, changed. And then there's Dionysus himself, who never quite settles down. He doesn't have a golden throne on Olympus like his peers. He's always on the move, always hosting, always half-smiling. One hand offers you a goblet, the other holds a thyrsus, a staff wrapped in ivy and tipped with a pine cone. It's a symbol of pleasure and danger, of nature and artifice, of a party that might never end, or might end very badly. You sit beneath a tree now, and Dionysus sits beside you. He looks like someone you know. Maybe a bit like you. He plucks a fig from a branch and offers it to you. "Are you tired of pretending?" he asks, echoing the actor from before. You don't answer. You just eat the fig. One last fringe tidbit before this section fades. In some rural cults, followers of Dionysus would smear themselves with mud and ash during certain rites. It wasn't punishment, it was transformation. To shed the self, to return to the earth, to rise again with something new beneath your skin. That's the lesson of Dionysus. He doesn't want you to be someone else. He wants you to be more of what you already are, beneath the rules, the masks, the names. And if that means putting on a flower crown and yelling poetry at the moon, so be it. You wake up, or at least, it feels like you do. The firelight flickers lower now, and the drums have quieted to a heartbeat thrum. Dionysus, still crowned in ivy and half-draped in embroidered silk, tilts his head toward the dark horizon. You sense it before he says anything. It's time to move again. Because Dionysus? He doesn't do staycations. He's got a whole cult to expand, and nothing spreads like a good roadshow. Tonight, you're joining him on what can only be described as the first ever Divine Theater tour, the kind where costumes double as disguises, and the final act might leave a town upside down. It begins in the east, or so the myths say. Some place his journey starting in Phrygia, modern-day Turkey. Others push it further. India, Arabia, even Afghanistan. Historians still argue whether these Eastern conquests reflect real historical memory of trade routes, or if it's just the Greeks imagining everywhere they couldn't control as full of wine and wild gods. Either way, Dionysus travels, and where he goes, wine follows. You hike alongside him now, past vineyards clinging to mountain slopes, past villages where no one sleeps soundly after he leaves. His entourage is part circus, part spiritual revival. Satyrs play flutes that make dogs howl. Maenads dance with serpents. Old men ride donkeys while quoting poetry no one's asked for. It's chaos, artfully staged chaos. You arrive at a town just after sunset. The streets are quiet, save for the nervous barking of a few dogs. Word has spread. Some say a strange caravan is coming, bringing madness, music, and maybe salvation. The local magistrate is pacing. He's not thrilled. You know this guy. Civic pride, neat scrolls, allergic to glitter. He's the kind who demands permits and believes strongly in curfews. But Dionysus doesn't ask for permission. He performs. The god arrives barefoot, trailing vines behind him like a cape. The townspeople don't know what to do. Do they offer him wine? Ask for a miracle? Arrest him? And just like that, the show begins. His rituals are unlike anything the Greeks have seen before. They're not polite temple sacrifices. They're immersive. Think full sensory experience. You're given a mask and a torch. Someone paints your face with crushed berries. You're herded, not led, into a forest clearing lit by moonlight and soft singing. And then, things escalate. The drums pick up. The Maenads begin their spiral dances. The satyrs leap and twirl. Dionysus walks among them, not as a king or prophet, but as a fellow performer, just slightly more magnetic than the rest. You hear people laughing, crying, confessing secrets they didn't know they were holding. You see someone fall to their knees in the grass and thank the god for finally letting them feel something. This is how Dionysus converts. Not by argument, by awe. It's tempting to call it magic, but it's more like transformation. You're not yourself anymore. You're a worshiper, yes, but also an actor, a vessel, a believer in the moment. And Dionysus? He's not above playing along. He shifts roles too, lover, fool, monster, muse. The god of masks wears many. In one obscure myth, he arrives in Lydia disguised as a mortal bard. He wins the town over not with lightning bolts, but with a flute and a smile. Only later do they realize who he was, and by then the vineyards have grown wild and everyone's dreams are a little weirder. The most famous stop on his tour? Thebes. Now, if you remember your Greek geography, or at least your tragic theater, you know Thebes doesn't usually end well for anyone. But this story is especially pointed. Thebes is ruled by Pentheus, a man who, if he were a flavor, would be plain oatmeal with a lecture on top. He doesn't just reject Dionysus, he mocks him. Calls him effeminate, a threat to order, a fraud, bad idea. Dionysus doesn't smite him. No, that would be boring. He lures him. You watch it unfold. The god, disguised again, tempts Pentheus into spying on the Maenads, promising sights both scandalous and divine. Pentheus, curiosity piqued and possibly under divine influence, agrees. But here's the twist. Dionysus dresses him in women's clothes. A disguise? Maybe. A trap? Absolutely. Pentheus climbs a tree to get a better view of the dancing Maenads. They see him. They mistake him for a wild animal, or pretend to. And they descend upon him, tear him apart. Leading the frenzy? His own mother, Agave. It's brutal, but symbolic. The story isn't just about punishment. It's about what happens when you resist transformation, when you deny what needs to be expressed. Pentheus doesn't die because he's bad. He dies because he clings too tightly to order. Historians still debate the moral. Was it an allegory about resisting change? A warning against toxic masculinity? A dramatic advertisement for joining Dionysus' club? You decide. But one thing's certain. After Thebes, no one doubts Dionysus again. You walk away from the ruins with a strange sense of clarity. This isn't just a theater tour. It's a revolution. A one-god rebellion against repression. Every town Dionysus visits becomes a stage, and every person a potential actor. And just like that, he's gone again. Off to the next town, the next performance, the next mask. You're left with ivy in your hair, music in your ears, and a sense that you might never be quite the same. The dawn after Thebes is unusually quiet. The ground is littered with snapped laurel branches and bits of mask ribbon. You sit on a stone wall, picking dried wine stains off your tunic, while the wind hums through the olive trees. Last night felt like a fever dream, a play with no clear ending. But Dionysus? He's already on the move. He doesn't linger in places that resist him. But he doesn't forget either. Now you're following him to the next stop on his mythic itinerary, a place where the air is thick with pride and paranoia. Cities like Thebes weren't the only ones who found Dionysus a bit much. Any polis with tightly wound laws and a rigid class system eyed the traveling god with suspicion. Which, to be fair, is understandable. He did have a habit of turning order into interpretive dance. You arrived just in time to witness another performance. This time, it's not a play. It's a confrontation. A group of elders stands at the edge of the city, arms folded, eyebrows raised so high they might escape orbit. They've heard the rumors. Women abandoning looms to follow a god into the mountains, men dressing like their sisters, rituals that blur the line between worship and rave. Their chief concern? What if this catches on? Dionysus steps forward. No throne, no soldiers. Just a Thyrsus staff and that impossible calm. He's not here to debate. He's here to demonstrate. What follows isn't a speech. It's a show. The sky darkens, not with storm clouds, but with swarming birds that sing in uncanny harmony. Vines creep through cracks in the pavement, blooming grapes out of season. And the people? They begin to move. Slowly at first. Swaying. Then spinning. The music comes from nowhere. The air pulses with rhythm. Even the city guards are tapping their spears like drumsticks. Dionysus closes his eyes. You do too. This is how he works. Not with threats. With surrender. He doesn't take power. He loosens it until you willingly set it down and start clapping along. Still, not everyone is convinced. A young man, probably someone's earnest nephew, stands and shouts, "Is this piety or madness?" Classic question. But instead of answering, Dionysus offers him a drink. Not wine. Water. The kind that runs cold and clear from sacred springs. The man drinks. His face softens. He sits down. The gods don't always shout. Sometimes they just change the flavor of your silence. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Why is Dionysus so threatening to cities? Because cities need structure. They run on rules, taxes, borders. But Dionysus runs on impulse, connection, and unpredictability. He doesn't demolish society. He questions it, one dance step at a time. His rites create liminal space. A break from the ordinary. Think of it like ancient psychological maintenance. One scholar even suggested Dionysian festivals served as societal reset buttons, safe bursts of sanctioned chaos that kept bigger revolts at bay. Historians still argue whether this worked or just freaked people out more. And it wasn't just emotional. Dionysus changed physical spaces too. Theaters, remember? They weren't originally places for popcorn and murder mysteries. They were sacred spaces, amphitheaters carved into hillsides, always near a temple to Dionysus. Audiences didn't just attend, they participated. Even the stone benches buzzed with memory. You sit in one now, warm under the morning sun. A goat grazes nearby. The stage is empty, but you can feel what's been performed here. Grief, joy, fury, release. That's what makes Dionysus different. He doesn't ask for belief. He invites experience. And once you've danced, cried, or laughed with him, belief tends to follow. But of course, not every city yields. Some double down, declare his rites illegal, accuse his followers of indecency, treason, even witchcraft. You watch as one city drafts a decree banning ivy crowns and public singing after sunset. A week later, the vineyards die. Coincidence? You glance sideways. Dionysus winks. One curious thing. In regions where he wasn't outright rejected, Dionysus often merged with local gods. In Thrace, he fused with a mountain deity. In Phrygia, he took on traits of a foreign storm god. He's flexible, adaptable, like water in a cracked vase. He fits where you least expect him. But there's one city he hasn't reached yet. Not properly. Not fully. Athens, the intellectual capital of Greece, home of Socrates, politics, and extremely long debates about the soul. Dionysus is coming, and you're going with him. You reach Athens just as the city begins to yawn awake. It's a place of geometry and philosophy, where marble buildings catch the morning light like white sails. But beneath all that logic and symmetry, something more primal stirs, something Dionysus is very interested in. He doesn't march in with fanfare this time. No wild chorus of satyrs, no Maenads doing cartwheels down the agora. He walks quietly, in sandals dusty from 100 festivals, and stands at the foot of the Acropolis, looking up. Athens prides itself on order, on reason, on the fine art of debating over watered-down wine. This is the home of Plato, of civic law, of theater critics with scrolls full of hot takes. Dionysus? He's the god of letting go. But here's the twist. Athens doesn't reject him. It welcomes him. It builds him a theater. You're sitting in it now, the theater of Dionysus. Cut into the southern slope of the Acropolis like a half-moon, it seats thousands. You can almost hear the murmur of the crowd as the city Dionysia begins, Athens' grand festival in the gods' honor. And it's not just a party. It's a civic event. Politicians attend. Soldiers sit beside citizens and slaves. Everyone's here, and everyone's watching. Because when Dionysus comes to Athens, he doesn't bring chaos. He brings catharsis. The plays performed in his name, tragedies, comedies, satyr plays, aren't escapism. They're mirrors. You watch characters suffer, fall, struggle, and hope. And in doing so, you process your own hidden storms. Historians still argue whether these festivals served a religious, psychological, or political function. Most agree, probably all three. A play begins. The chorus enters, masked and robed. Their feet beat the earth in slow rhythm. You feel it in your chest. They speak in unison, their words floating into the spring air like incense. The subject? Dionysus, of course. One of the most famous plays ever written, The Bacchae by Euripides, is performed here for an Athenian audience that likely knew its warning signs. You watch as Pentheus struts, mocks the god, and ultimately pays the price. The message is clear: deny your inner wildness at your own peril. But Dionysus is more than a symbol. He's present. Every chant, every line, every masked actor moving with exaggerated grace, it's an offering, a ritual. The audience isn't just entertained. They're part of it. And yet, there's something so calm about it. You expect frenzy. Instead, you find reverence. The same God who inspired midnight raves in the forest is now being honored with impeccable diction and carefully structured drama. This is Dionysus in city clothes. Still wild at the core, but refined. He's evolved, or perhaps adapted. You catch sight of a young boy in the front row. He's wearing a miniature ivy crown. His father, a stonemason, leans over to explain the moral of the play. The boy nods solemnly. He's not sure what hubris means yet, but he's learning that gods can smile and snarl at the same time. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, literally, Dionysus is worshipped by actors and poets. They pour out tiny libations before going on stage. Some say a few whispered prayers to him before each line, hoping for inspiration. Or at least good reviews. You wander backstage, as it were, and see a mask laid on a stool. It's smiling. On the inside, a faint inscription. To Dionysus, who sees us all. A quirky little note here. Some ancient writers claimed Dionysus invented masks, not as costume pieces, but as tools of transformation. Wear a mask, and you become a god, or a king, or your neighbor's tragic cousin. Theater, in this sense, becomes divine play, a shared dream enacted in daylight. Now, the chorus sings the final strophe. The play ends. The audience exhales. You look around and see faces wet with tears, not from sadness, necessarily, but from release, from recognition. This is the real genius of Dionysus. He doesn't just give you wine and music. He gives you yourself. A chance to feel all the feelings you've tucked away behind daily tasks and polite nods. He unlocks you, gently or not. And Athens? It keeps inviting him back. Each year, the city Dionysia continues. New plays, new debates, new revelations. The god of madness becomes the god of art, of empathy, of shared humanity. You leave the theater slowly, walking under vines that seem to have grown longer since morning. Dionysus is nowhere to be seen. But somehow, he's also everywhere. The sun dips low behind the olive trees as you continue along the dusty path, the air warm and thick with the scent of crushed thyme and grape skins. You haven't seen Dionysus for a while, at least not directly. But you feel him, in the nervous energy of a shepherd's laugh, in the hush that falls over a tavern just before the singing starts. He's there in the pause, because Dionysus, for all his laughter and spectacle, isn't just a party god. He's the god of extremes, of contradiction, of intensity. He is, to put it plainly, too much. You think back on the stories, the rivers of wine, the ecstatic dances, the mythic vengeance. 1 minute, he's granting joy and liberation. The next, he's unmaking kings and dissolving boundaries. He's the friend who makes every night unforgettable, and occasionally illegal. That duality defines him. And tonight, you're walking straight into the heart of it. You arrive at a quiet village, perched on a hillside with a view that could seduce even the most devout philosopher. The locals are wary. They've heard of Dionysus. Some whisper he's a demon. Others say he's salvation in a golden robe. They aren't wrong either way. The priest here, old, kind-eyed, with fingers stained from winepress work, tells you a secret. Dionysus brings out what's already there, he says, handing you a cup. He doesn't change you. He shows you. You sip. The wine is bitter at first, then warm, then suddenly sweet. It's like truth in liquid form. And now you see it. Dionysus isn't joy or terror. He's the edge between them. His presence magnifies whatever you carry. Grief, love, confusion, anger. Under his influence, everything is heightened. You aren't just happy, you're euphoric. Not just angry, you're divine rage in motion. A lesser-known myth creeps into your mind. One night, Dionysus visits a poet who's lost all inspiration. The god listens to him complain, nods politely, and then hands him a wineskin. The poet drinks. He writes all night. By morning, his fingers are bleeding, and he's written the saddest, most beautiful story of his life. Then he vanishes into the forest. Was it madness or divine inspiration? Historians still argue whether this myth references real ecstatic states used in early creative processes, or if it's just a metaphor for the writer's struggle. But either way, Dionysus becomes a patron of art, not just theater, but poetry, music, improvisation. He's not the god of finished pieces. He's the god of the moment when the spark hits. And sometimes that spark burns. You walk to the edge of the village where a small shrine stands, a stone column wrapped in ivy, topped with a worn-out mask. Offerings sit at its base, grapes, feathers, even a child's rattle. This isn't a god people forget, even if they try. That's the thing with Dionysus. He's not safe. Never has been. The Maenads, for example, aren't just fun dancers. Their ecstatic frenzies, fueled by the god's presence, could become violent. In some myths, they dismember animals with their bare hands. In others, they cradle deer like children. You never know which version you'll get. And yet, people keep worshipping him. You ask the priest why. He chuckles. Because sometimes, he says, you have to shatter the jar to release the scent. You sit with that a while. Then you hear it, music, faint but growing. A single reed pipe, a pulse of rhythm. You follow it through the olive groves and down into a field. There, beneath a fig tree, Dionysus dances alone. He sees you. Smiles. You want to ask him something profound, but all that comes out is, "Why do you do this?" He doesn't answer. He just points to the stars. And then, quietly, he vanishes again. You're left in the silence, with the feeling that everything inside you has been slightly rearranged. You wake under the fig tree, the stars still overhead, and for a moment you forget where, or who, you are. That's part of his magic too, isn't it? Dionysus doesn't just shift places. He shifts people, rearranges their souls like wine-stained puzzle pieces, and leaves them blinking at the sky. Tonight, you're heading into deeper waters. Not literally, though stay tuned for dolphins, but philosophically. You've danced, watched plays, and felt the thrill of ecstatic surrender. But what does it mean? Turns out, ancient thinkers weren't immune to the Dionysian mystique either. As you walk through a grove of laurel and cypress, you hear murmuring ahead, students arguing in circles, draped in wool cloaks and heavy ideas. You've stumbled upon a philosophical school. These young men debate everything: justice, the soul, the ethics of goat cheese. But now they're grappling with a bigger question. Is Dionysus just a party trick? Or is there something more? One voice cuts through. An older figure in the corner, sipping slowly from a clay cup. It's Socrates. Yes, that's Socrates. And what he says surprises you. I believe that God speaks truth through madness, he says, calm as a lake at dawn. And not all madness is to be feared. That stops the students cold. Because to philosophers, reason is sacred. It's the compass, the map, the whole journey. But Socrates, perhaps the most rational mind of the ancient world, makes room for Dionysus. He acknowledges that divine madness can reveal truth, that sometimes clarity comes only after you've lost your bearings entirely. Historians still argue whether Socrates meant literal Dionysian possession, or if he was speaking metaphorically about poetic insight. But the quote sticks. There is a madness which is divine. And it wasn't just Socrates. Plato writes in the Phaedrus that the highest forms of divine inspiration, love, prophecy, poetry, are all kinds of madness. For types, in fact, one of them, Dionysian frenzy. You wander deeper into the grove, past a stone bench where someone has carved a quote. He who is not initiated cannot understand. It's from the Eleusinian Mysteries, but it might as well be Dionysus' motto. You start to understand that Dionysus isn't about losing your mind. He's about expanding it, loosening its bindings so new thoughts, feelings, and identities can slip in. Here's a quirky tidbit. In certain Orphic traditions, Dionysus was considered a cosmic figure, a god of rebirth, connected to the soul's journey through life and death. These cults believe that by understanding Dionysus' suffering, dismemberment, and return, you could purify your own soul. In this version, he's not just the god of wine and revelry. He's the god of initiation, the one who tears you apart, not out of malice, but to help you rebuild something truer. So when he dances, it's not just celebration, it's ritual. When he laughs, it's not just joy, it's defiance. Against repression, against stillness, against pretending everything's fine when it's not. You pass an olive grove where an old woman tends a fire. She's humming an ancient chant. You sit beside her, and she tells you this. The gods who help you keep things together are important. But the ones who let you fall apart? They're sacred. She hands you a mask. You put it on. It's simple, just wood and cloth, but once it touches your skin, the world shifts. You don't become someone else. You become more of yourself. The part that laughs too loudly. The part that mourns without apology. The part that wants to sing, even badly. And in that moment, you understand something new. Dionysus doesn't give you madness. He gives you permission to feel, to release, to break the spell of control we cast on ourselves every day. You stand. The mask in your hand now feels warm, like it's pulsing with memory. You carry it with you as the sun rises through the trees. Somewhere ahead, Dionysus is still dancing. And you're beginning to understand why. The sun has climbed higher, brushing the sky with soft golds and pale blues, and you've traded dusty paths for cooler shadows. The grove opens into a wide, sloping field, and in the distance, a low mist curls at the horizon. You follow it, the air growing quieter, thicker. You're entering the underworld now. Not the terrifying one of fiery pits and eternal punishment, This one is older, deeper, and full of stories. And yes, Dionysus has been here too. Of course he has. No god of transformation could resist crossing the ultimate border, death. You walk through a grove of black poplars, and the mist settles like a hush. Ahead is a low stone archway, half hidden in vines. An entrance. You pass beneath it, your footsteps muffled. There's no screaming, no flaming gates. Just silence, heavy and watchful. This is Hades. And Dionysus? He's been here before. To bring someone back. The myth goes like this: after his mother, Semele, was incinerated by Zeus' divine power, Dionysus never forgot her. Gods move on. Dionysus? He goes back. He descends into the underworld to retrieve her, a mortal. A woman whose only crime was asking to see a god's face. It's one of his quietest myths, and one of the most powerful. Unlike Orpheus, he doesn't fail. Unlike Heracles, he doesn't use brute force. He negotiates. He charms. Some say he dances. Whatever the method, he succeeds. Semele rises from the dead and is brought to Olympus. She becomes a goddess, renamed the One. A mortal woman, welcomed among immortals. Because her son believed she should be. Historians still debate whether this was a late addition to Dionysus' mythology, a humanizing moment to soften his reputation, or if it's a core part of his identity, the god who reverses the irreversible. Either way, it's rare. How many deities venture into death to save someone else, not themselves? You pass through a corridor of stone pillars now, each carved with symbols, grapes, masks, a single eye. This underworld is not fire and brimstone. It's memory. It's depth. You feel it in your bones. Dionysus isn't just about escaping rules. He's about rewriting them, including the rule that says dead is dead. One curious detail: in certain Orphic and mystery traditions, Dionysus is actually reborn from death. Torn apart by the Titans in a primal, cosmic myth, his heart is saved and he's reborn through Zeus. This version, older and darker, presents him as a dying and rising god, a symbol of the eternal cycle. He's like the grapevine, pruned, pressed, crushed, and then reborn as wine. You sit on a smooth rock by an underground stream. The water is clear, flowing slowly. It's called the Lethe, the river of forgetting. If you drink, you lose your memories. But next to it, another stream, Mnemosyne, the river of remembrance. Drink that, and you awaken to divine truths. 2 rivers. 2 choices. You look up, and Dionysus is there. Not in golden robes, but in a plain linen tunic. His hair is tied back. He looks tired and peaceful. He sits beside you, not speaking, just existing, the way people do when they're not afraid of silence anymore. You ask him, "Why bring her back? Why go through all that?" He answers without looking at you. "Because love is a kind of madness, and madness belongs to me." Then he laughs. Not loud, not wild, just a soft, low chuckle that echoes off the stone. The underworld begins to recede. The mist lifts. You blink, and the field is green again. You're back in the world of the living. But you're not the same. You've seen what Dionysus can do. Not just to towns or temples, but to time itself. He's the god of boundaries, and the one who crosses them. Between man and woman, joy and grief, stage and reality, life and death. You reach into your satchel and find a grape. You don't remember packing it. You eat it anyway. The road back from the underworld is quiet, but not heavy. The kind of quiet you get after the final applause in a theater, the house lights still dimmed, the audience dazed with afterglow. You walk slowly, processing it all. Dionysus has danced with life, death, ecstasy, and grief, and somehow he's still not finished. Because now it's festival season. You arrive in Athens at the start of spring. The air smells like orange blossoms and burnt offerings. People move through the city with a purpose, arms full of garlands, crates of amphorae sloshing with freshly uncorked wine. The streets feel like something's about to happen. And it is. It's time for the Great Dionysia, also called the City Dionysia, a multi-day celebration dedicated entirely to him. And not in the light a candle and say a prayer kind of way. No, this is a full-scale, city-sponsored, pull-out-the-stops theater-palooza. You're about to witness the Olympics of storytelling. It begins with a procession, a massive one. You join a throng of people weaving through the streets, priests, playwrights, actors, regular citizens, even slaves and medics, foreigners who lived in Athens. Everyone's holding something: masks, torches, statues, baskets of offerings. At the front, a grand wooden phallus is paraded through the city, festooned with ivy and ribbons. It's not crude, it's sacred. A symbol of fertility, abundance, and, well, Dionysus being Dionysus. The festival opens at the Theater of Dionysus, nestled into the southern slope of the Acropolis. You find a seat among thousands. The stone is warm from the sun. Someone hands you figs wrapped in leaves. The crowd quiets. The first chorus takes the stage. This isn't just entertainment. It's competition. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides present new works, 3 tragedies and a satyr play each, performed in sequence. Imagine watching 9 hours of emotionally intense theater in a single day, seated on stone, sharing laughs and tears with your fellow Athenians. Repeat that for several days. It's not binge watching, it's sacred civic engagement. And Dionysus? He watches it all. His temple looms just behind the stage. Offerings are made, hymns sung. But more than that, everything here belongs to him. The actors don masks in his honor. The stories themselves, tales of hubris, justice, gods, and grief, are like ritualized dreams made public. You lean forward as a tragedy unfolds. A king loses his way. A mother weeps. A chorus chants in haunting cadence. The crowd is still. Some cry. A few murmur in agreement. You feel it too, that ache in the chest that says, I felt that loss. That moment when you realize the character's fate is your own, in miniature. That's the Dionysian effect. He doesn't just bring chaos. He brings catharsis, the cleansing purge of emotion through art. Historians still debate how much of this was truly religious versus theatrical. But the lines blurred easily. The Greeks didn't compartmentalize the way we do. And when the tragedies end, the satyr play begins. Now it's your turn to laugh. Satyrs bounce onto the stage in padded suits with exaggerated appendages, cracking jokes and parodying the very tragedies you just watched. It's irreverent, raunchy, and absolutely necessary. Because Dionysus isn't just the god of tears, he's the god who reminds you it's okay to laugh after you've cried. You eat, you drink, you cheer. You fall into conversation with strangers. No one asks what class you are, or who your family is. Here, under Dionysus' open sky, everyone's just a spectator and a participant, equal before the stage. And here's a quirky little fact. The judges who awarded prizes to the best plays? They were chosen by lottery. Literally random citizens. Democracy in art. Very Dionysian. The final day of the festival arrives. Winners are announced. Vines are hung over statues. Children mimic scenes from the plays. And you? You're changed. Not because you saw gods fly on stage, but because for a few days you felt everything deeply, openly, and in public. As the crowd disperses, you catch one last glimpse of Dionysus at the edge of the theater. Not his temple. Him. He nods once, faintly amused. And just like that, he's gone again. The scent of crushed time still lingers in your clothes as you leave Athens behind, but the rhythm of city festivals has softened into memory. Dionysus, that ever-wandering god, is already pulling you elsewhere, this time across the sea, where marble columns give way to sunburned vineyards and Roman togas shuffle into view. Because as the Greeks lay the groundwork for theater, philosophy, and ritual madness, the Romans, well, they Romanize everything. And Dionysus? He gets a rebrand. Meet Bacchus. You arrive in Rome just as the empire is beginning to find its swagger. Temples rise. Roads stretch like spiderwebs across continents. And Roman religion? A buffet of gods borrowed, renamed, and fitted into the state's political machine. Dionysus, too wild and weird for polite Roman dinner parties, is filed under exotic imports and renamed Bacchus. Same essence, just more Latin. And at first, things go surprisingly well. Romans love a good banquet. They're fine with a little ecstatic dancing, as long as it ends on schedule and nobody loses a senator. But then, things spiral. The Bacchanalia, a series of secretive rites dedicated to Bacchus, begin to spread across Roman territory. Held at night, led by charismatic women and foreigners, these ceremonies mix wine, music, sex, and mystery into a heady brew that the Roman Senate doesn't quite know how to swallow. You stand outside one of these gatherings, tucked into a grove near the Tiber. The music pulses softly from behind woven vines. Inside, voices chant. The air is thick with myrrh and fermented honey. You can feel it, something sacred and subversive happening just beyond you. You ask a passing merchant what's going on. He shrugs. They say Bacchus makes you see the truth. Or forget it. Then comes the backlash. In 186 BC, the Roman Senate issues the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a decree banning bacchanalia across most of Italy. They claim the rites are corrupting youth, encouraging disobedience, even plotting sedition. Thousands are arrested. Temples are closed. Initiates are forced to renounce the cult. Historians still argue whether this was a moral panic or a calculated move to suppress foreign influence and non-traditional social structures. Probably both. You read the decree yourself. It's etched into bronze, all harsh lines and legalese. But between the words, you see fear? Fear of joy without permission. Fear of transformation outside the state's control. Fear of people becoming more. You find a back-chic priestess in a quiet courtyard. She's old, her hands spotted with age and incense ash. You ask her why they follow Bacchus. Her eyes narrow, and she smiles. Because he sees us, even in the dark. The cult never fully dies. It just adapts, goes underground, moves into art and metaphor. Statues of Bacchus appear in Roman villas, lounging on grapes, wine cup in hand, gaze just a little too knowing. Poets like Ovid and Horace slip references into their verses, winking through metaphors. Bacchus becomes less of a god, more of a mood. You walk through a Roman villa now, past frescoes of wine-soaked banquets and twilight forests. The god appears everywhere, half asleep, half smiling. His presence lingers, not in temples, but in the atmosphere. In the idea that maybe joy can be sacred. That maybe chaos has a place, too. And here's a fun detail. The Roman festival of Liberalia, held in March, celebrates Bacchus as a god of male adolescence. Boys don their adult togas and step into public life. It's a coming-of-age ritual framed by Bacchus' spirit of release and transformation. Because even Rome, for all its order in stone, couldn't quite erase the pull of a god who dances in between. You stand on a hill as the sun sets over tiled roofs. The air smells of bread and smoke. You raise a cup, not of wine, but of silence. Dionysus, Bacchus, whatever name he's wearing today, smiles through the twilight. He's still here. The centuries pass like wine poured slowly into an amphora, spiraling, darkening, gathering sediment. You walk now through dustier streets, under heavier skies. The Roman Empire has fractured, temples abandoned or renamed, marble gods chipped into ghosts. And yet, Dionysus remains. Faint now, but not forgotten. You're entering the age of Christianity, a new empire of the soul. Its saints and martyrs cast long shadows, its theology reshaping the map of the divine. And Dionysus? Well, he doesn't quite fit. At least, not at first. You find yourself in a small early church, dimly lit by oil lamps. The air smells of stone and beeswax. A mosaic glimmers on the apse wall, Christ as the Good Shepherd. But look closer. The shepherd's robe is tinted wine-dark. A grapevine curls at his feet. In the corner, a vessel brims, not with water, but wine. You're not imagining it. In early Christian art and symbolism, traces of Dionysus appear, quietly, subtly, unmistakably. Scholars still argue whether this was intentional syncretism or just artistic carryover. But the echoes are clear. Both Dionysus and Christ are sons of God, born of divine human unions. Both offer wine as a symbol of transformation. Both are associated with death and return, madness and revelation, feasting and fasting. Both gather misfits, outsiders, and those society would rather ignore. You step into a monastery library, flipping through illuminated manuscripts. A monk leans over and mutters, "Some say Dionysus was the devil in disguise." Another adds, "Others say he was just the prototype." And that's how the church saw him, conflicted, divided. To some, he was a relic of pagan indulgence, a reminder of dangerous pleasures and ecstatic rites best forgotten. To others, he was simply absorbed, his symbols repurposed, his followers baptized, sometimes literally, but not without resistance. The early Christian fathers, Clement, Tertullian, Augustine, wrote scathing critiques of Dionysian rituals. They condemned the drunkenness, the revelry, the loss of control. One even described the Maenads as possessed women, barking like dogs in the wilderness. And yet, the wine remained. The Eucharist, central to Christian worship, involves wine transformed into divine blood. A sacred drink, shared among believers, meant to connect the physical and the eternal. Sound familiar? You sit in a pew now, late afternoon sun casting fractured color through stained glass. The priest chants in Latin. The chalice lifts. For a moment, you remember another figure, holding a cup in a grove beneath a fig tree, whispering, "This is who you are." The parallels didn't go unnoticed. Some early theologians tried to rewrite Dionysus entirely, turning him into a warning against false ecstasy. Others simply ignored him, hoping that without believers he'd fade. But Dionysus was never just belief. He was experience, memory, emotion. He lingered in village festivals, folk songs, late-night laughter. He slipped into carnival, into masked parades, into spring rites that people danced through without even knowing why. Even today, in remote corners of Europe, rural festivals celebrate wine gods with vine wreaths and goat dances. Officially, they're about the harvest. But Dionysus dances there, too, behind every mask. One quirky case. In 17th century Italy, a local bishop banned a vineyard festival that included costumed men pretending to be Bacchus' sons. He claimed it was heretical. The villagers paused the festival for a year, and then started again, quietly, calling it something else. That's Dionysus for you. You can't cancel him. He just changes costumes. Now you walk through a ruined temple turned church turned museum. Tourists pass you, snapping photos of faded frescoes. But you stop in front of a statue. It's old, half buried in ivy, but unmistakable. Dionysus, leaning on a satyr, cup in hand. A guide nearby whispers, "That's the last one in the region." They couldn't quite bring themselves to destroy it. Because even in a world of saints and angels, the God of transformation still waits in the wings. Watching, waiting, smiling. You turn to leave, and someone offers you a sip of communion wine. You take it. Sweet, heavy, ancient. And somewhere, the chorus begins again. You stand at the edge of modernity now, your feet planted where cobbled myth and asphalt reality meet. Dionysus has traveled with you from the sacred groves of Greece, across Roman feasts, into church crypts, and back out through folk rituals, changing shape with each age. And somehow, he's still not done. Because the theater hasn't closed. The stage just looks different now. You step into a dim performance hall, this one electric, flickering with neon instead of torches. The audience murmurs. Smartphones glow like artificial stars. On stage, a single figure waits behind a curtain. The show is about to begin. But it's not a Greek tragedy. It's a cabaret. A punk opera. A rave in a Brooklyn warehouse. A one-woman show about grief, love, gender, and transformation. The spirit of Dionysus, it turns out, fits easily into LED lights and whispered monologues. In the 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche declared a revival of the Dionysian spirit. He divided the essence of art into two forces, the Apollonian, order, harmony, structure, and the Dionysian, chaos, ecstasy, emotion. Real beauty, he argued, was born where the two collided. Historians still debate whether Nietzsche understood Dionysus the god, or if he merely hijacked the metaphor. But his words set the tone for a modern world just beginning to rediscover the wild. You walk past a gallery in Berlin. On the wall, a mural of Dionysus in sneakers, his thirst is now a selfie stick. Below it, graffiti reads, "Party like it's 500 BCE." You chuckle. But it's more than a joke. Dionysus shows up in modern art, literature, music festivals, and therapy circles. Anywhere people explore altered states, challenge identity norms, or blur the line between sacred and profane, he is there. Velvet Underground lyrics? Dionysian. Queer performance art reclaiming myth? Dionysian. That one-off Broadway show where the audience drinks with the actors and cries about childhood? Dionysian. He even surfaces in psychology. Carl Jung recognized Dionysus as an archetype, the divine child, who embodies creative potential, emotional surrender, the beauty and danger of the unconscious. Jung's patients, in dream and trance, often met Dionysian figures, seductive, strange, liberating. You step through a college campus now, where a student theater group is rehearsing the Bacchae in an empty classroom. The Pentheus actor checks his makeup in a phone camera. The Maenads were Doc Martens and flannel. But the lines, those ancient, jagged lines, still cut deep. "Strange are the ways of the gods," the chorus chants. And what about you? You, who followed Dionysus from thy birth to wine feasts to philosophical salons and candlelit cathedrals? You've seen him tear down kings and cradle grieving poets. You've danced with his Maenads and questioned your reflection in his cup. You realize now that Dionysus was never just the god of theater or weird parties. He was always something broader, deeper. He was the god of becoming. Becoming more than your role. More than your title, your gender, your grief, your expectations. Becoming whatever the moment requires. He is chaos, yes, but meaningful chaos. The kind that cracks the shell of routine and lets something real come out. You sit on a park bench as twilight falls. Nearby, someone strums a guitar. A couple argues gently over who forgot the wine. Somewhere, a rehearsal wraps, and applause bursts like sudden rain. You close your eyes. In the rustling trees, you hear a whisper of drums. In the warm breeze, the scent of crushed grapes. And just beyond your vision, someone dances barefoot, laughing softly, eyes shining like stars. It's him. Still here. Still waiting for the next curtain to rise. And now, the story slows. The lights dim not just on the stage, but within you. The drums have quieted, the vines have curled back into the earth, and Dionysus, ever unpredictable, has vanished into the fog between myth and memory. You take a long breath. Let your shoulders settle. Let your mind drift. You've walked a winding path tonight, from sacred caves to candlelit cathedrals, from shouted poetry to whispered dreams. You've met a god who laughs and mourns, who dances on the edge of reason, who offers joy with one hand and truth with the other. You've seen what it means to lose control, and why sometimes that's exactly what we need. Dionysus teaches that release is not weakness, that transformation is not shameful, that art, pleasure, love, and madness are not indulgences, they are doorways. And beyond them waits something honest. You remember the masks, the laughter, the tears, the feeling of being seen, not judged, just held, by a god who wears no armor, only ivy. So, as your breath slows, and your thoughts soften like petals closing in twilight, carry that with you. The understanding that joy can be sacred, that tears are not failure, that letting go is sometimes the most divine thing of all. Rest now. The play is over. But the story never ends.